haven't. Oh, there's the message.
It should be recording. You should be notified that you're
Yes.
being recorded.
By attending this meeting, I consent to being recorded.
John, I'm recording you right now.
That doesn't sound dodgy at all.
How do you feel?
I don't know. I feel like I should be putting on a show right now.
Well, we're about to put on a show.
Oh, here we go.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Wrestling Doesn't Make Sense. It's a podcast where me and John talk about pro wrestling and how much sense it doesn't make, which is a lot. John, what's in the pro wrestling news these days?
Not much really. It's all pretty quiet.
Well, fair enough. That's the end of the show. Thank you very much for listening. I hope you guys liked it. I'm only joking. That's a little funny bit. Can you imagine if you had our own wrestling show?
I can imagine that. Yeah.
Oh my god. Oh god, that would it be good? I don't know.
Wow. I'm sure if people really wanted to find out, they could
Google it.
Yeah.
Look for it on YouTube.
Still out there.
If they wanted to watch it, which, people didn't want to 3 years ago, but maybe they want to now. Who
When
knows?
it's all out of date and our references won't make any sense.
Wow, that's pop culture. Really.
There you go.
You know what I mean? Yeah, that was a little joke. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Smark Avengers. That's us. My name is Tony Smark, and I'm here with Peter Smarker. And I ran out of Smark puns already, which normally would be a detriment because there's 3 of us on the show. But fortunately or unfortunately for us today, Corey is not here. He's not present on the show today, which is good for me because I couldn't think of a third Smark Avenger pun.
Yeah, I'm still racking my brain.
It's hard. Tony Smark, the easiest one.
Yeah.
Peter Smarker, it's a little forced, but it works. And then that's it. There's no other ones.
Surely there's a hero whose name is Mark.
In the Avengers?
Isn't Moon Knight? Isn't his real name Mark
Spector?
Yeah, there you go. Smark Spector.
Smark Spector? Corey can be Smark Spector. Was he an Avenger?
I think he was definitely on the Secret Avengers. Ooh. I'm not sure if he was on the... Actually, he might have been on the main Avengers team as well.
Okay, well, we'll give it a pass. That's fine. Corey can be Smark Spector. He's not here today. I'm gonna do this bit, Corey. You can cut this bit out if you want. His baby child got into like a hot air balloon, homemade hot air balloon, a little basket with balloons attached to it, flew off into the sky, which was obviously a terrible thing. So Corey made his own hot air balloon ride to chase after his son. So they're both off in the clouds somewhere. I don't know if they have any navigation or any way to steer that craft. I have no idea. It was a spur of the moment thing. He just wanted to go off. And I understand. You want to go rescue your son. That's fair enough.
Especially if you're getting to ride in a hot air balloon as well.
It's a fun time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What a great adventure that would be. Yeah, the kid might be traumatized at first, but then afterwards you'd be like, oh, but think of the adventure you had. Think of the sights you saw. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So
we look forward to Corey. Hopefully we'll be back next week with his son. But if he doesn't have a son, things happen.
Yeah.
So because Corey's not here today, me and John thought, why don't we talk about the 90's Spider-Man cartoon, which we are both big fans of.
Yeah.
I don't remember if Corey said he was a big fan of it. I think he did.
I think he was, yeah.
It's a great show.
It was a great show.
Really, like the theme music.
The theme music, which was performed by Joe Perry from Aerosmith.
Was it really?
Yeah, man.
Wow. That's pretty funny because it is a banging, like, real, like, hardcore musical blast.
Yeah. guitar heavy. And
Oh,
you
I
got the
love that
like
guitar.
the scuzzy Spider-Man, Spider-Man. It's great.
Yeah, it's like there's some kind of effect on it. I don't know what it is, but he's a radioactive Spider-Man.
Yes.
He is. They remind you of that at every single
Constantly.
opportunity. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I watched a couple of episodes today
Ooh.
for prosperity to kind of remind myself because it had been a long time since I went back and watched it. And dude, that opening, a lot of the opening um, intro is just clips from the show,
Mm-hmm.
but it really made it look like a fucking kick-ass show.
Yeah, it's like explosions going
Explosions
on.
going
And
off and fucking running away from bad guys and Doctor Octopus throwing stuff at him, and
yeah.
you know what I mean. Venom's there.
Mm-hmm.
Hydroman's there.
Of course. Why wouldn't he be there?
Hydroman made it into the title screen. Pretty fucking cool. I mean, this is gonna surprise you, and it's gonna surprise everybody that's listening. But the episodes I watched before we started the show
Mm-hmm.
were the first appearance of Hydroman
Oh.
and the first appearances of Carnage.
Ah. I thought
Carnage.
you might have said the Hobgoblin, but
I
I'll allow it.
was trying to watch the Hobgoblin one. I ran out of time.
Ah.
You have to prioritize.
Yeah, I
You know what I
guess.
mean? Because I do love the Hobgoblin, very famously played by Mark Hamill,
Mm-hmm.
and an amazing role. Like he really went into it. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
you see that with a lot of those Spider-Man villains. Like they're not
Mm.
half-assed in it; they're really going for it, which I really liked. I think that's one of the reasons I really liked Carnage was that you got this like maniacal energy from Cletus Cassidy.
Mm.
He really like famously the 90's Spider-Man cartoon weren't allowed to actually kill anybody or like have any like open wounds or anything like this. Like there was a lot of rules that they had to follow,
Mm.
which you would have thought made Spider-Man a tough thing to animate, especially when you deal with psychopaths and people like Cletus Cassidy. But one thing that I always remembered, and one thing that I still think kind of carries over after having watched it recently, is that Cletus Cassidy still seems like a maniac. He
Oh
really
yeah.
does still seem like a scary dude. And part of that is the voice acting. I don't remember. We can probably look it up pretty quick. I don't remember the guy that did the voice of Cletus Cassidy. I stopped. I paused the credits to look at it to see who it was, but I forgot to write it down.
It
Which is
was a guy called Scott Clevedon.
okay. That
He
sounds
was
familiar.
actually Scottish.
Wow.
Yeah.
How ironic that his name is Scott and he is from Scotland.
There you go.
Gotta be pretty rough. But his voice acting as Cletus Cassidy makes you really feel like he's a deranged maniac.
Mm.
It's wonderful. You know, it's the power of voice acting to do that heavy lifting that they couldn't really do in the animation process because their hands were tied. What with America being very prudish when it comes to what they're allowed on TV versus what they allow to just happen in schools on a day-to-day basis. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's sort of understandable. This was a kids show, and having a serial killer like slashing people up would have been maybe a bit too far for like some parents, but
Serial killers go into American schools every week.
well, when you put it like that.
You know what I mean? I'm just we don't want to get too hard at our political commentary over here. Just saying that's a fact. But yes, it's a kid show. Obviously, they have to be a little bit respectful. You know, they
Mm.
can't just show somebody getting fucking gutted. You know, get their throat cut. You have to be a little bit diplomatic about it,
So
which
was
is
this
fair enough.
show like your first sort of introduction to Carnage, or did you read him first in the comics?
I think If I can remember correctly, this show was my first introduction to Carnage, and then very shortly after this, because when did that show started in '94,
Yes.
and Carnage was in season 3 or 4.
I think it was 3.
I feel like it was 3. I feel like it was 3.
Yeah, apparently his episode came out in November 1996.
Okay, so I feel like I did see the Carnage stuff. That's it. What now? That is interesting because I'm trying to remember the timeline of the comics. Because, like I said, I started reading the comics in the pretty much the bang middle of the Clone Saga.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason we picked up the comics was because Carnage was on the front cover.
Mm.
So I'm wondering now. The thing is, the UK printing of the comics was, I think, about 2 years behind the American printing of the comics.
Yeah.
So when the Carnage comic came out, obviously 2 years later we would have got it in the UK. So I'm like, well, would 1997 be that time frame? And it actually might be. If you
I
said, what did
think,
you say?
yeah.
The
This
Carnage,
was late 1996, like sort of
yeah.
November.
So like, if you roll on a little bit, it might be possible that 1997 was when I first read those Spider-Man comics with
Mm-hmm.
Carnage on the front cover. That does seem to track. You know, I feel like that's pretty accurate. I actually have to go back and look at those comics and see, because they have the dates on the front cover of them, obviously.
Yeah.
But I would say, yeah, you know what, 97 probably sounds pretty accurate. I mean, it's a long time ago,
Yeah.
you know, and I drink a lot,
Yeah.
and I have a lot of brain damage. One of those concussions I got, you know. But that I would say that kind of tracks out, you know.
Hmm.
It's a shame that they didn't put Carnage in the opening sequence, though.
Well, yeah, I think he probably arrived in the show a bit
Too late.
too late for
Yeah.
that. Although he did have his own action figure, though.
And to be fair, you know, he came back a couple of times. It was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Whenever I was a kid, we had a VHS tape. So what do you think of that, people listening to this? We used to have what we called VHS tapes. What the fuck did it even stand for?
Oh, man. I could probably find out.
VHS, video home studio tapes.
Video home system.
Oh, I was close.
Yeah.
Pretty close, man. So we had these VHS tapes used to put into this giant machine,
Mm-hmm.
and it would play the tape. The tape had, like, I don't know, like a fifth of the amount of storage that a DVD would have.
Yeah. Not very much at all.
If you were watching if you bought a VHS tape of a TV show, like let's say Spider-Man, you maybe get 3 episodes of that show.
I'd say
tape.
maybe like 5 or 6 pushing it. Like,
I mean, but a lot of the time they wouldn't do that.
mm,
You could normally get like a 2-hour film would go on. I think most VHS tapes kind of capped out at about 3 hours.
yeah, that sounds about right to me.
And I feel like commercially, a lot of the time, people would sell their VHS tapes with about 3 or 4 episodes of a show on it. And I remember that we had a VHS tape of Spider-Man, which had the original Venom saga in it. So I think that was 3 episodes from the TV show where they did the whole Venom bit where, you know, they go to space. John Jameson is in space. He comes back and has the Venom stuff on the spaceship. Eddie Brock does the thing. It's different in the TV show. I think in the TV show, Eddie Brock is trying to expose Kurt Connors as the Lizard. I think,
That's the first episode of the TV show. Is him trying to expose Kurt Connors.
yeah, but that adds to the downfall of Eddie Brock, because in the comics, um, is it the Hobgoblin thing? The Ned Leeds. What is it? What I can't remember what it is, but what is it? The thing that Eddie Brock reports on that.
Oh no, I think it's the Sin
Not.
Eater.
It is the Sin Eater. You're correct. It's not. It's not the Hobgoblin. It's the Sin Eater, where Eddie Brock makes this claim and Spider-Man debunks it, and that adds to the hatred. And again, it's a TV show for kids. You can see why they didn't put the Sin Eater in it.
Yeah.
That's a lot for kids to try to fucking comprehend. This guy with a sawn-off shotgun just shooting people in the heart, that's a bit much. Fair enough. But that kind of stuff, like, starts off the slow mental decline of Eddie Brock, and then the spaceship that John Jameson is in comes down. It's got the Venom goop in it. Venom seeks out Eddie Brock, and a lot of that plays out quite like the comics, I think.
Yeah.
After
It's
that,
like an abbreviated version of what happens
yes,
in the comics, but
yeah,
like the whole coming from space thing as well was something that wasn't in the comics originally, because Spider-Man got the symbiote from
Secret
being
Wars,
on Secret Wars, yeah, and on the
yeah,
Battle World.
but that was in space, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean it was, but I mean it wasn't like how it played
Yes,
out here.
it wasn't nothing to do with John Jameson. It wasn't that kind of idea. The
Yeah.
idea of the symbiote being from space is that general idea is still correct. But the way they played it out was different. And again, like, for the TV show, it was much more dynamic.
Yes.
Like, it worked, and it was, like you said, it was kind of truncated, to the point.
Yeah.
Let's not waste too much time getting the Venom.
It's one of my favorite things about the TV show as well, is how it took stories from the comic books, but wasn't like totally, slavish to kind of bringing it over from one medium to the other.
Yep.
It was, they'd adapt it in a way which sort of fit into the world that they were building and
Yes.
allowed it to kind of breathe on its own, but still be recognizable for anyone who was a fan of the comics.
Yeah, I feel like they did that in a better way than the Marvel Universe, Marvel Cinematic Universe, because I feel like the idea is similar in that they didn't want to do a carbon copy of the comics, but the Marvel Cinematic Universe did a very good job of very clearly making their storylines not the same as the comics. They're same characters, but the storylines are very different a lot of the time. And the Spider-Man TV show did a really good job of, like, there's elements from both. You can see where parts of it make sense in the comics, and you can see where they made their own decisions. Because, like, for example, the Venom storyline, the beginning of it's not the same.
No, not
But
at all.
after that, a lot of the story beats are quite similar.
Yeah, like
Him going to the church,
yeah.
and ringing the bell, and all that stuff, which is the way it should be. Like, those are really important story beats. Really symbolic, important stuff that really tell a lot about the character of Venom and Eddie Brock. Like, those are great story beats that you need to have in there, and they included. And then again, at the end of it, the way they solve the Venom problem is they're at the space station that John Jameson's on, and the noise and the fire of the rocket launching scares the Venom symbiote off Eddie Brock, and then Spider-Man sticks it to the space shuttle and it flies off. It's not the way it happens in the comics, but that's a great idea.
Yeah.
It's a great idea. It's a great visual, and it all makes sense. Now, in the Carnage episodes that I watched, they explain how the symbiote comes back to Earth. Do you remember how the Carnage symbiote or the Venom symbiote? Do you remember how the Venom symbiote comes back to Earth after Spider-Man glued it to the side of a space shuttle, and that space shuttle went up into space?
I have no idea.
Do you want to just like throw out a guess?
Did the rocket come back from wherever it went?
Correct.
Wow.
But who brought the rocket back?
Someone brought it back.
Correct.
Wait, this wasn't Dormammu somehow, was it?
Oh,
Wasn't he involved in those episodes?
Oh, John, your detective skills are second to none. What happened is Dormammu was talking to his associate on Earth, Baron Mordo, and he somehow worked for Tony Stark's corporation.
Baron Mordo did.
Yes.
What?
Yes. Whatever his civilian identity was, they didn't reveal this in the they just said that he worked for Tony Stark's company. He was some kind of investor, and that he was working for the company. And then this is how they explained it in the TV show. Mordo just turned the rocket around, brought it back to Earth. That's it. And you're like, okay, well, I know you have to move stuff along.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have a lot of plot to fill. Fair enough. And so the rocket crash lands in like a park. This huge ass giant industrial fucking space rocket that nobody was able to trace. NASA didn't trace it. Tony Stark's company that sent it up there didn't trace it. It just crash lands in a fucking park.
Yep.
And then two people in the park see the spaceship crash land in the park, and they go over to see what it is, and then the Venom symbiote takes over them both.
Yeah.
And then at this point, Eddie Brock is in prison already because of the shit he did as Venom.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the episode, we establish that Cletus Cassidy gets arrested for trying to kill the chief of police and some other people.
Mm-hmm.
He gets arrested, and Baron Mordo appears in his astral form in front of Eddie Brock in prison and says, if you want the Venom symbiote back, you got to work for Dormammu. And Cletus Cassidy hears this and says, fuck him. Forget Eddie Brock. Give whatever you're going to give to him to me.
Mm-hmm.
And Mordo says, I'm good. It's for Eddie Brock. Then one of the two people from the park come into the prison and then give the symbiote to Eddie. Eddie escapes as Venom. And then okay, once we start breaking it down, you'll see how much sense it makes. So already, the beginning of it didn't make a whole lot of sense, did it?
No. I'm
The
still
rocket
not
bit.
entirely sure why they want Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote to be reunited.
Wow. This is why. Dormammu needs two things to come back to life. Or to come back to Earth, I should say. He needs the souls of living people. He needs a tribute of souls of living people.
Mm.
And he also needs a device that will open up a portal for him to cross over. So once the device is operated, you throw the souls into the portal, and then he can cross over because he takes the power of the souls and then can cross over through the portal. The portal device is being manufactured by, who could it be? Tony Stark.
Yeah.
So they have a big opening of the Tony Stark transmutal portal device. Tony Stark is in Los Angeles. This device is in New York, where Peter Parker, the journalist photographer, is watching it. And the idea is they're going to send some items from New York to Los Angeles, where Tony Stark is, via this portal device. Baron Mordo is in the audience. watching this happen. Peter Parker looks around and goes, "That fucking guy is Mordo right there. That's fucking him. He's dressed in civilian clothing. That's fucking him. I know that guy. He didn't just because he's not wearing the green cloak doesn't mean that's not him. I wonder what's going to happen, right? So what happens is Venom tries to steal the device while Mordo's just watching him.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, well, why doesn't Mordo just steal it?
Yeah.
No. And then I thought, okay, this is the misdirection is Mordo's doing the long game where he's still pretending to be the civilian identity that works for Tony Stark. So there's obviously some sort of payoff later on, right? You know what I mean? Like he's still like, oh, I'm just a guy that works for the company. I didn't know anything about this, right? Because if he went up there and stole it, then everybody would know he was the one that stole it. It wouldn't work. But if he gets somebody else to steal it on his behalf, he can still feign ignorance, you know?
Yeah.
So this goes on. Obviously, Tony Stark isn't there, but Jim Rhodes is there, head of security, who turns into War Machine somehow. Well, Jim Rhodes gets blasted away, and then War Machine turns up. So you know how it is. And Dormammu appears in front of Baron Mordo and says, "This isn't going the way it's supposed to go. We need backup." Which you would think would be Mordo steps up and steals the device. No, the backup is we send the second person who was in the park to go and meet Cletus Cassidy and then give him the other part of the symbiote because the symbiote reproduced. Give him the other part of the symbiote because he wanted it to begin with. Give him the symbiote. He becomes Carnage, and then Carnage comes and steals the device that Venom couldn't steal because he's too busy fighting War Machine and Spider-Man. Right?
Yeah.
You're on board? So then Carnage does this, steals. They end up somehow stealing the device. They bring it back to whatever the hideout is. Venom is like, all right, I did that, so now I can go home, right? And he just kind of fucks off. And Dormammu realizes that Carnage is a bigger threat than Venom. So he keeps Carnage. He's like, don't worry about Venom. Don't worry about him. Carnage, you're the man, because you can go out and steal the souls of people that I need to be able to come back across the portal threshold, right? So that's part of it. And of course, because it's the Spider-Man TV show, obviously you can't show people dying, but you can show Carnage like stealing their life essence.
Yeah.
This was the big thing in the Spider-Man TV show, was that nobody died, but like their essence. You remember like Morbius?
Yeah.
He didn't. He stole their plasma.
Exactly. He didn't bite anyone's neck. He had
No.
little suckers on his hand.
He just stole their plasma. You're like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
You know? So Carnage just pulls the life force out of people and then at some point puts it into a big like pot.
Yeah.
Like a Vias. And then comes the big conflict where Spider-Man is doing the thing where Madam Web would turn up every so often and give him very cryptic clues. And so Madam Web says, you need to keep your friends close and your enemies even closer. And Peter Parker says, well, I guess my friend at this moment is Iron Man, who Tony Stark sent from Los Angeles to New York because of the theft of the device. I don't know what Tony Stark is doing, but he sent over Iron Man to do his work for him. That lazy son of a bitch. So that's the friend part of it. Oh, who could my enemy be? And he spends a long time to build. I'm like, oh, obviously it's Venom.
Yeah.
Because Venom is in the hideout. So Venom knows where to go. Right? And then they do this bit where Venom loves Ashley Kafka, the therapist who works in Ravencroft, who was helping him before he got the Venom symbiote back. So he does this thing where he gets the Venom symbiote back. He's evil, but then he sees Ashley, and then he's like, "Oh, I love you, but I'm Venom. I'm conflicted." And then she's like, "If you get rid of the symbiote, I guess I'll love you." And he goes, "Okay." So they go to Kurt Connors, and he zaps him with a sound gun or whatever, and he puts the symbiote away, and then Eddie Brock and Ashley Kafka kiss because you're like, is that all it takes? He's a fucking criminal murderer, psychopath that you're trying to diagnose, but he got rid of
Exactly.
his
She's crossing some serious ethical lines here.
but he got rid of his evil suit so you can kiss him. So that's you love him now. So once she realizes Carnage is stealing people's life essence, she goes running after Carnage. Eddie Brock wakes up. Where's Kafka? Oh, she's chasing after Carnage. I want to go after Carnage too. You can't. You're Eddie Brock. Oh, I want to put the suit on. You can't because then the Venom symbiote will take you over again, and you won't be able to separate Eddie Brock and Venom anymore. And he's like, well, that's a risk I'm willing to take because I love her. Again, the love part of this has been established in like 8 minutes.
Yeah.
It's real quick. It's
Yeah.
really quick. He gets the suit back, and so now Spider-Man, Iron Man, and Venom go to fight Carnage and Baron Mordo and Dormammu, which, to be fair, is a pretty cool thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm on board with that. I think that's cool.
They did a lot of that kind of thing though, where there's a lot of crossover with like other Marvel heroes. Like you'd have Punisher show up, or Blade, or like later in the series, like the Fantastic Four are involved and Captain America.
Yes, I remember the Punisher a lot because he fought Morbius.
Yes.
Morbius time.
Yes.
I don't remember Blade. I don't think I remember Blade.
Blade was a big part of that storyline.
Wait, I do remember Blade. I do, because didn't he have like both Blade and Punisher had sidekicks?
Yeah, Blade had Whistler.
Yes, I do remember that.
Who I don't think was in the comics at that time, but was such like a memorable character that they basically transferred him over into the movies. I can't remember what the name. Oh, it was Microchip, Punisher's sidekick.
Yes, this all sounds very familiar. I remember them both having sidekicks. Now that you said that, I do remember that. I don't know if I remember Captain America. Wait, was Captain America in the multiverse stuff?
Well, first he was part of the what was it called? The Six Forgotten Warriors storyline.
Okay.
In the 5th season of the show, where basically Kingpin was trying to uncover some sort of doomsday weapon that the Red Skull had brought into New York. And part of that was trying to get all these keys, which all these old heroes had. And like basically the hero group was Captain America's group with like Miss America and the Wizard and
Dr. America, Baby America.
And basically, yeah, Captain America had sacrificed himself to sort of stop the Red Skull from using his doomsday weapon, but then he kind of they both get like brought out of stasis during the episode and continue fighting.
Well, they love fighting,
especially each other.
Oh yeah, gotta fight each other. You know what I mean? But did he come back again?
Yeah, and then he showed up in the Secret Wars.
Yes, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've seen the Secret Wars.
It's really good. I thought they did a good job of, again, like adapting a pretty famous comic storyline, but putting their own twist on it and sort of making it still feel a part of like the sort of universe that they built at this point. But still introducing like characters that we hadn't seen in the show as well, like the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom as well. And yeah, just doing a pretty good job of it.
Yeah. I that's the thing. I can't be, the problem with like those old TV shows was a lot of the time when they showed it on TV, it wasn't always in the right order.
Mm-hmm.
So I do remember like parts of that show because I know the Carnage came back for like whatever their multiverse thing was.
Well, he sort of came back. It was more
Yes.
the symbiote came back because it
Yes.
was bonded with like a Peter Parker who had basically gone off the deep end.
Yes.
Uh, and he turned into Spider Carnage and was trying to blow up the multiverse.
And I don't
Um,
blame him.
yeah, I mean, why not?
We've seen what damage the multiverse can do. Fuck him. Blow it up. You know, it's a nightmare to try and figure out. That's
It all sounds like really far removed from where the series begins. Like
yes.
in
I felt
terms
like that.
of everything was really sort of street level and
Grounded.
yeah.
Because
And
that's what I
then
remember. Whenever I was watching these, like the Carnage Venom episodes, I'm like, the thing I remember the most about that show was the Kingpin.
hmm
A lot of the early episodes were about the Kingpin and how the Hobgoblin worked for the Kingpin, and it was stuff like that. You know, you they had a little bit of like Norman Osborn stuff, but all of this was very street level.
mm,
It wasn't like cosmic fucking space bullshit or time travel and craziness. That happened like way later.
yeah, but I
But like,
think they built to it quite well though. Like
I mean,
especially with the introduction of Madam Web sort of midway through the series and she was
yeah,
hinting for a long time that there was like a bigger role that Spider-Man slash Peter Parker had to play in the universe, and it was all
yes,
leading to that sort of Spider-Verse. In the show, it was called the Spider Wars.
yeah, yeah. So
Uh,
what's it called? Technically, it wasn't a Spider Verse. We have to make that
yeah,
distinction.
but yeah,
Spider Verse was
I
different.
think that's one of my favorite things about the show, though, is it did sort of naturally build itself up through that, and like it was really heavy on the like serialized storytelling as well.
Yeah.
Like every episode pretty much led into the next one. Like there wasn't too many sort of standalone episodes.
There was a lot of what I really liked about that from watching them again was that they had a big overarching storyline with multiple episode arcs within it.
Yeah.
So you would see at the beginning of the title card would say Sins of the Father episode 1 and then
hmm
whatever. And then that part would have 2 or 3 episodes in it. But it's a small cog in like the bigger overall arc. And I thought that was a really clever idea for a kid show. And that's quite close to the comics is that this big overarching storyline that has a couple of like 3 or 4 episodes self-contained storylines that by the end of it you can see where they build to.
Yeah.
I thought that was really clever. And it's very comic-y, you
Oh,
know.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd like to see that kind of stuff play out more. Um I don't know. Is there? It's not a Spider-Man TV show now, is there?
Not quite yet. I think there's one coming, which is I'm not sure if it's supposed to be based on the MCU version of Spider-Man or like if it's just sort of in its own world, but it's basically supposed to be about Spider-Man when he first gets his powers in high school, and is sort of learning to become a hero basically. So but I don't know when abouts that's supposed to be releasing. I'm guessing sometime next year, but there's been like no trailers for it or anything yet. So
That's a shame. So we don't know if Hydroman's going to be in it.
yeah, I mean, we can live in hope.
I find out in the course of me watching the show that the reason they put Hydroman in the 1984 show was because they couldn't get the rights to the Sandman.
Oh, is this because of James Cameron's
Correct.
attempt at a Spider-Man movie, which never really
Correct.
got off the ground?
And this is why Electro only appears like near the end of the show.
Mm-hmm.
Which again, Electro, Sandman, pretty big guys in the Spider-Man universe.
Yep.
who have already been showcased in the films. We've seen them both in Spider-Man 3, and then what was it, Spectacular Spider-Man 2,
Uh,
and then No Way Home.
Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Amazing Spider-Man 2. My
Yes.
mistake. I'm so sorry. Please don't come after me. Anybody listening to this, it was my mistake. But the writer was like, well, Hydroman and Sandman have similar kind of physics. So, I'll use, if I use one in replace with the other one, you understand the deal, which, hurts me a little bit. Hydroman's such a wonderful character, but they did get a really good showing, which I really liked.
Yeah.
And I think that the man deserves.
And he sort of played a significant role in the series as well, because
he came back again.
Yeah, he came back, and it was revealed he was a clone, and then it was revealed that Mary Jane was a clone as well.
Yes. Yep.
And obviously that sort of threatened to tear Peter Parker apart because of the grief of losing Mary Jane all over again. But yeah, it was pretty good.
I thought it was really good. And again, interesting stuff to try and like tell in a kid's show.
Yeah, definitely.
You know what I mean? Like pretty heavy ideas where you're like, okay, this isn't just like good guy punches bad guy. Like there's layers here. There's a lot of like, you have to remember a lot of the stuff that it pays off eventually, and then then you're like, then you're really thinking about the morality of stuff.
Yeah.
What's the deal with the clone and the real person? Like, really
like
interesting.
I tried, like one of my friends has a kid who he was about 5 years old or something, 5 or 6 maybe, and he was like a big Spider-Man fan. And my friend was like, "Oh, do you have anything that I could show him to kind of, appease his Spider-Man fandom?" And I was like, "Yeah, watch these DVDs of the animated series." And it was a bit too advanced for him at that age. All
What age is
the
he?
like about 5 or 6,
Okay.
and all the like themes going on, and like everything. Like I don't think it was the sort of Spider-Man that he was expecting it to be.
Yes.
Whereas since then, there's been like a lot more sort of kid-friendly versions of like Spider-Man cartoons, which I guess are a bit more like easily digestible.
What is the name of the show? With, I don't know if you know this, but there's a show with Spider-Man and Miles Morales and Spider-Gwen.
Is
I
it
don't.
Spidey and his amazing friends?
Yes, I think so. I don't remember if they call her Ghost Spider or if they call her Spider-Gwen. I don't remember what they call her. But my friend has a young child, and I was at his house last year, and obviously, you pick and choose your spots, right? Sometimes you want to watch TV, sometimes the kid wants to watch TV. So we're like, okay, let the kid want to watch whatever they want to watch, and the kid wanted to watch that Spider-Man show, which I was happy enough to watch. I like Spider-Man, and I thought that was a really interesting way to introduce Spider-Man to kids.
Yeah.
It's not at all accurate. It doesn't make any sense. It's very, very childlike. It's very like, oh, I'm the Green Goblin. Oh, I slipped in a banana skin. Oops. That kind of deal. I like the way that they all like interact with each other. It's very sweet. But I remember that from that show. And that seems to be a more recent deal. It's very, it's all CGI and stuff. And we sell a lot of like those toys at work. Which I don't care for, frankly.
Yeah. I think my nephew is big into that as well, and he's 3 years old, so
yeah, exactly. But it does seem the very situational. Like when you're 3, you probably love that show.
Yeah.
When you're 6, you're like, that show's for babies.
Yeah.
A baby show. And then that's when you watch the Spider-Man 1994 show.
But those shows still serve a purpose because they're
Correct.
introducing a whole new generation to Spider-Man, and hopefully like setting up their own sort of fandom for the character
Yeah.
for the many years to come. So
And that's the thing, is that I think we've talked about this, but that was kind of our introduction to Spider-Man.
yeah,
We saw
100%.
that show and we were like, this fucking rules.
Mm-hmm.
That guy's a fucking scorpion, you know? Um, didn't matter that he was, because in the TV show, nobody's really dog shit.
No, not really.
Know what I mean? Like nobody. I remember watching the TV show, and the Shocker was one of my favorite guys. And then you read the comics, and they're like, "Oh, Shocker's a dumbass." I'm like, what? No, he's cool as hell. Shocker, by the way, voiced by Jim Cummings,
Yes,
the
indeed.
beautiful, the very incredibly talented Jim Cummings. If you have ever watched any kind of Disney product from the late 80s to the mid 90s, you've heard Jim Cummings' voice.
Yeah.
You're familiar with him. I saw a podcast he did with Hank Azaria very recently.
Who also played Eddie Brock in the
Correct.
animated show.
They were talking about how they didn't really work together that much, and they said the first time they worked together was probably Spider-Man.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
Because that, I think, was a very early role for Hank Azaria. He didn't do a whole lot of voice acting. He did a little bit of The Simpsons by that point.
Oh, he
But
was all over The Simpsons by that point, surely.
yes. Well, no, at the beginning, well, he talks about this on the show, but he had done a couple of voices and they kept bringing him back. I'm like, why don't you do this voice? And then he kept coming back. So after a while, I think maybe by 94, he was well established on the Simpsons. But obviously, he would have recorded his lines before 1994.
Yeah.
But yes, I remember that. What do you remember the name of the guy who played Carnage? I've forgotten his name already. Scott.
What was it? Scott Cleverden.
Scott Claverton. I'm not familiar with his other stuff, but he did an amazing job as Carnage. An amazing job. At some points, I thought he sounded a lot like Rob Paulson, who, funny enough, played Hydroman.
Indeed.
His Hydroman stuff is really good. I would implore you to go back and watch that Hydroman episode and just listen to the voice acting. It's really good. There's a bit, and this is something else I want to say as well, is that when I watch the Carnage ones, sometimes when you watch some of those 90s cartoons, like the Batman show, for example, they look beautiful. But there's definitely parts of the animation where you can tell they're cutting some corners.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That happened a lot in Batman. It happened a lot in Spider-Man. But it happened a lot in the fucking X-Men cartoon. It happened a lot in the X-Men cartoon. But one thing I noticed, Hydroman, I think, was season 2, and Carnage was season 3. And when watching them, maybe part of it was because obviously with Carnage, I watched 2 episodes. There's a lot going on. You have Carnage and Venom. There's a lot of web shooting and Carnage turning his hands into axes and stuff like this. And there's a lot of animating going on. But I felt that watching the Hydroman episode, the animation itself seemed smoother. Seemed much. It didn't seem like they were cutting as many corners. And whenever you watch the Carnage Venom ones, like the fight scenes are great, but in between the fight scenes, you can see where the corners are cut like much easier.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's the same with if you watch an anime TV show. If you watch anime, the fight scenes are beautiful, but in between the fight scenes is a lot of talking, and a lot of that talking is usually just a still shot of somebody's face. And then the mouth moves.
Yeah.
But nothing else moves. And like you can tell where the budget went. You know? But I really did like a lot of the way that the Hydroman episode worked, animation wise, but also vocally. Like the vocal direction that was amazing. Watch that episode, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, at the end of it, he makes a scream. He like yells out because he's gonna beat up Spider-Man. It's stunning. But that's Rob Paulson. He's again, if you paid attention to cartoons in the early 90's, you are familiar with Rob Paulson. He was
So, what would you say then, like on that subject? Like, which episodes were your favorite episodes from the series? The ones that
that's
people should go back and definitely watch.
that's tough because off the top of my head, because I had the Venom episodes on tape, those are the ones that I remembered the most.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember them again vocally. Hank Azaria is a wonderful voice actor.
Mm.
I remember them being really impactful, and like we said earlier, like they follow elements from the comics that work really well. They tell their own story in their own way. They're really really good. I really liked a lot of the older um, Kingpin stories because they had the Hobgoblin as his kind of accomplice. Because again, you know because of the character that the Hobgoblin is, he's going to turn on the Kingpin. I remember those, and I remember again. Who do you remember who did the voice of the Kingpin?
Yeah, it was a guy called Roscoe Brown Lee or something like that. Hang on, let me just double
He
check.
was great.
Roscoe Lee Brown.
That guy is like he's the Kingpin.
Yeah, man. His
A lot of
voice
those
fit
voices
that
were
character
on point.
perfectly.
Exactly. A lot of those voices were so on point.
Yeah, like Ed
Like
Asner as J. Jonah
J. Jonah
Jameson.
Jameson, perfect.
100%.
That's. I mean, I'm not taking nothing away from um the guy. What's I've forgotten his name. What's his name?
Yeah, I forgot his name as well.
You know the guy from the films.
Yeah,
I know his face and I know his name.
J.K. Simmons.
J.K. Simmons. Thank you. Not taking anything away because J.K. Simmons visually and vocally beautiful version
Mm-hmm.
of J. Jonah Jameson, but Ed Asner as the animated voice was that was our that's the cranky old cantankerous man. That's him. That's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. That's perfect. Doctor Octopus was perfect.
Yeah.
That's right.
Ephraim Zimbalist Jr.
That's what I feel like Doctor Octopus should sound like. Again, no knock on um why can't I remember people's names?
Yeah.
Alfred Molina. No knocking
No.
Alfred because Alfred Molina, like bell to bell, one of the best Spider-Man villains of all time.
Mm-hmm. In any medium.
In any medium, like incredible. But there's something about that Otto Octavius from the animated show that like that's what you think he sounds like, you know?
He also played Alfred in the Batman
Did
animated
he?
show. Yeah.
Whoa, that's range.
Indeed.
That's some range right there. You know what I mean? That's incredible. So I would say, for me, looking back, I would watch the first couple of seasons of the Spider-Man show because, not to say that the older ones aren't good, but the good thing about Spider-Man is he's always been that grounded character.
Mm.
He's fighting guys like the Scorpion, the Rhino, and stuff like this. If you want to see fun stuff like that, watch the first couple of seasons. You know, I would say 1 to 3, and just you'll find him fighting the Green Goblin, the Hobgoblin, the Kingpin, like all the classic villains are all there, except of course for Sandman and Electro, as we covered. Don't worry about them. But all the other guys are there. The Lizard. I think the Lizard's the first episode.
Yeah, man.
Like that's like bang right off the bat. Here is the Lizard, and you understand all that stuff, you know. So for me, I would say nothing specific stands out other than the Venom stuff because I've seen it so many times. But like, I would go back and watch the first couple of seasons, and you can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
You know, what would you think?
Well, you know, I'm a big sucker for anything goblin related. So those first two Hobgoblin episodes, which introduce him, I think fantastic. They do such a good job of like establishing the characters, just this absolute wild card. Like starts off basically working for Norman Osborn, then sells Norman Osborn out to the Kingpin, then basically takes over the Kingpin's empire for a brief period, and then gets chased off by Spider-Man. Like, yeah, that's just beautiful stuff. And then in the second season, there was the crossover with the X-Men as well, which had the actual voice cast from the X-Men animated show. Um, and yeah, that was really fun as well. And then the third season, they had the Hobgoblin again, and this time he actually fought the Green Goblin because Hobgoblin had managed to get his hands on the time dilation accelerator, and
Of course he
yeah,
did.
and Green Goblin wanted it, and then that led into like one of the best episodes of the series, the Turning Point, which is basically just an adaptation of like Amazing Spider-Man 121/122, where Green Goblin, he knows Spider-Man's real identity, then uses that information to like get his loved one up onto the top of a bridge, and in
Any
this
bridge,
case,
doesn't
inst-
matter which bridge.
instead of Gwen, it's Mary Jane, and then she goes over the edge, but instead of dying, she falls into one of the portals and like
Yes.
ends up in limbo. And then yeah, like Green Goblin gets hoisted on his own Goblin glider as well, and ends up getting knocking himself into a portal and then disappearing. And it's just, yeah, beautiful stuff. It's a great adaptation of the comic storylines, but within the confines of the world they built within the
Yeah.
animated show.
That's part of it too. Like we were saying earlier, like they had all these like rules you have to follow. It's like you can't really have somebody falling off the bridge and dying.
Yeah.
So they didn't do that. They were able to come up with an idea that had repercussions later on in the show that was different from somebody just dying, which maybe is something that the comics should follow. Because we've talked about this before in this show, where, and I think we're going to be talking about this at some point in the future, wink, wink, about comic deaths and how sometimes they feel really cheap.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's just, it just happens. And nobody ever dies for real except Uncle Ben. And then even then, you're like, did he die?
They've sort of brought him back a couple of times.
They sort of brought him back a couple of times. It's bullshit. But like, that's part of it. Like nobody ever dies for real. And so that's an interesting concept in the TV show where you're like, well, if nobody can die, then that way we have to come up with a alternate way for people to disappear that isn't dying, and then B, make that have lasting consequences the way that a death would.
Yeah, yeah.
But in a different manner. And I think that's really clever because they were able to do that a lot. And I think that's really significant because I think that sometimes in the comics, I say sometimes, most of the time in the comics, that the reason people die is for like, if I may smark up this conversation for a bit, for like cheap heat.
Mm-hmm.
A little, it's a very easy way to go, oh no, like it puts a lot of heat on somebody. For example, the Kingpin killing Aunt May. Like that whole thing was just bullshit. And the way it resolved was bullshit. It didn't make the Kingpin look good. It didn't make Spider-Man look good. Aunt May came back 2 months later anyway, so it didn't make her death impactful. It was just insignificant, but it was done to get the reader to emotionally invest in the idea that Aunt May was dead, which was just cheap heat, you know. Whereas with the comic or with the TV show, they were a lot more free to like do. It's just a time portal. And like, what does that mean? Like you'll find out. You're like, okay, cool. That's all right. I'm gonna find out. I want to know what's gonna happen. And you did. You did find out.
Yeah.
We all find out it eventually. It's interesting stuff.
And
So
yeah, it's sort of that's the way it ends as well. Like the very last episode, the very last scene, basically. Like, not to get into spoiler territory, if you haven't watched this and
we can.
hearing about this show for the
It's
very first
20
time,
years later, dude. We can
I
fucking spoil it.
yeah, fuck you if you haven't seen it and don't want to know.
Yeah,
But
fuck you.
but basically, yeah, like Spider-Man saves the day, saves the universe, and Madam Web's like, okay, well, as a reward, we're gonna go and rescue Mary Jane now and bring her back from the void that she ended up in. So it's like, yeah, that whole thread basically ended up going from the third season right the way through to the fifth season.
Yes, there are consequences.
Mm.
Lasting consequences.
So he did best episode. Do you have a worst episode?
Honestly, I can't think of any because, like I said, I watched a couple of ones recently, and a lot of the older episodes, I remember them with like nostalgia. I don't remember ever watching an episode where I'm like, this is fucking dog shit, dude.
Well, I'll give you one example.
Oh, it's got the well. Okay, hang on. Can I try to guess the villain?
Go for it.
The kangaroo. Was he in it?
No, he never showed up in
Oh,
the animated
that's
series.
that's just racist. They didn't put the kangaroo. Spot.
No, I quite like the Spot in the
I
show.
love the Spot. Was he on the show? I don't remember him on the show.
Yeah, he was the guy who invented the time dilation accelerator,
Oh, that's
Dr.
important.
Jonathan Ohm,
That's
and
him.
then yeah, he got turned into the Spot and ended up getting sucked into one of his own portals as well, I believe.
That's a shame. Yeah, what a way to go.
Yeah.
That's a shame. I always liked the Spot as a character, and I felt really annoyed when they didn't give him enough justice in the comics. And then they did in the Spider-Verse film. They made him like a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
What I really liked about that was they made him an idiot and also a big deal. I'm like, yes, that is how you do it. Correct.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We can work it. We can more than one dimension to this character.
Yeah, yeah.
The worst one, Scorpion.
No.
Oh, Spider Slayer.
No, I mean, I wasn't a massive fan of the Spider Slayers, but again, it sort of served a purpose in like giving Alistair Smythe a reason to hate Spider-Man and
Yes.
end up working with Kingpin. But I'll put you out of your misery
Okay.
with two words: Rocket Racer. As if that wasn't bad enough as well, the villain in it was Big Wheel.
Oh, how have I not seen this episode?
Yeah, man, it's not good.
It's got to be good. It's got the big wheel in it.
Oh dear.
Can we explain who the big wheel is for anybody listening?
I mean, it's a guy in a big wheel.
Correct, but it's got like machine guns and shit.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a what would be the way you describe it? A man is inside like a kind of like a miniature like Ferris wheel kind of thing.
Yeah, they called it a gyro wheel.
Yeah.
Which I guess was supposed to explain how it stayed upright, or I don't know.
It's got like arms and like machine guns and stuff in it.
And it has little dudes in jetpacks who fly out of it as well.
Yeah, because just don't think about it too much.
Mm.
Why wouldn't he have that? He's the big wheel.
Exactly.
Does he drown in this one?
I can't remember. I think it might end up in the river, but I'm not sure.
I think that's how it does in the comics, right? He just falls in the river and they just go, well, I guess he drowned.
Yeah, that shows him.
Yeah, that's it. Like Spider-Man didn't even beat him. He just drowned, and Spider-Man was like, well, that's all right. I don't have to worry about him anymore. He's dead.
Yeah.
Fuck him.
Pretty sure he wasn't worrying about him to begin with either.
Wow. Was Stiltman in the TV show?
Never appeared in the TV show.
Oh, was the what was the guy? The looter.
Nope.
What about the Trapster?
No, they there's a lot of guys that they left on the chopping board.
I mean, you can see why they didn't put the looter in.
I guess.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can understand why they wouldn't put like we gotta write an episode about the looter. You know, I can see why they were like, nah, we'll skip. We can skip that one. To be fair, I always liked the Trapster.
Paste
I
Poppy.
really correct. But whenever he became the Trapster, like I love that because they took a character that sucked and made him like fucking cool as hell.
Hmm.
And then they forgot about it and made him like PS Pop Pete again or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they just made him a dumbass again. I'm like, well, don't make somebody cool and then negate it immediately. Because I feel like they did that with a Shocker. I remember an episode or an issue of the comics where they made the Shocker. Because I always liked the Shocker from the TV show.
Hmm.
And then there was a couple of episodes or a couple of issues of the comic where they made Shocker really cool, like a bona fide fucking villain.
Mm.
And then you didn't see him for ages. And then he was in that Nick Spencer Deadly Foes of Spider-Man thing. What was it? Not Deadly Foes of Spider-Man.
You know,
Is it that? It's not Deadly. It's some other word.
something that, yeah, I
The
forgot as
Foes
well.
of Spider-Man, where he's just like a fucking crazy. What was it? He doesn't like small spaces or something. He has some problem where he doesn't like something, and that's part of an issue. And he's just like a big loser. And like that's not the Shocker, man. That's not the way I remember.
Superior Foes of Spider-Man.
Superior Foes of Spider-Man, correct. I didn't like that version of the Shock. I loved that run. To be fair, it was so funny. I just didn't like that version of the Shocker. You know, because I
That's
felt
fair
like he
enough.
was a badass guy. Like I would love gauntlets that fucking shock the ground. You know.
And wearing a comfy looking pillow costume as well.
Lovely, lovely, comfy looking costume. Like if you got punched, it wouldn't hurt.
No.
It seems like a great idea, and everybody made fun of him. Like, why? He's smarter than everybody else.
There you go.
You know what I mean? The Shocker, smartest villain in the world. Maybe not in the world, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty smart. What else do you want to say about the Spider-Man TV show?
I mean, I think we've covered a lot.
I mean, we talked
the
about
good
Venom and
stuff.
Carnage for a long time. Is there anybody else you want to talk about? Like, give a spotlight to?
You know, I think they did a good job with a lot of characters in it. Really, like we mentioned the Kingpin and how he was pretty much the main villain for the bulk of the show, really.
Yeah.
But certainly the first
At least
few
the first two
seasons.
seasons, right?
Yeah. But then they did such a good job with Doctor Octopus and how Kurt Connors was like a recurring character as well, and constantly fighting to, not turn into the lizard. Even like characters like Harry Osborn, like they gave a good run with. Like, he's sort of Peter's best friend, but then, with the problems that his dad starts having, he goes off the deep end as well, and then he turns into the Green Goblin because he starts seeing his dad from limbo, and that drives him mad. And then, yeah, like that whole deal was pretty well done. Um, and Morbius was, like a
Yeah.
character who was all over the show.
Yep.
Like he was, for most of the second season, into the third, like he was battling his vampirism and like trying to stop himself from turning evil, and like in love with Felicia Hardy as well, who was also like another character who was there basically from the beginning and had a pretty strong arc, like starting off as sort of the rich bimbo who, didn't really give Peter the time of day, but then sort of grew a conscience as the series went on, through like her relationship with Morbius, and then like having her father show up again, and then being given the like super soldier formula, which turned her into the Black Cat and encouraged her to become a hero.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the writing was so good. Like, I
Yeah.
think John Semper was the guy who was basically the showrunner and basically wrote a lot of the episodes, or at least kind of, plotted a lot of the storylines, and other people may have written them, but like, yeah, he was basically the head visionary of the show, and the dude deserves so much credit for the way he
Yeah.
took a lot of familiar stories and just adapted them for the 90's and like the medium of comic cartoons as well. Like, he
Yeah.
did such a good job of that.
Yeah. I think if you have like 20 minutes to get your idea across, like how do you do that? How
Mm.
do you fit like 50 years of comics into like these 20-minute chunks, like the pacing of it and stuff? Like I think that's really
Mm.
important too. They did a very good job with it. Really. I really enjoyed it. I feel like as um as Goblin connoisseurs we should mention, obviously Green Goblin was good, but the Hobgoblin was the star of that show.
Mm-hmm.
Hobgoblin. That's the reason I have a big affinity for the Hobgoblin, and probably the same reason you have one too, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%.
That show, like the Hobgoblin, just seemed like a fucking badass. Voiced by Mark Hamill, of course. Famous
Mm-hmm.
for something or other. Famous for being
Some
the
movie about something, I don't know.
famous for being the Joker
Yes, that's right.
in the animated Batman cartoon. So imagine being the Joker and the Hobgoblin in like two of the most important comic adaptations of the 90's.
Yeah.
Like that's pretty good going. That's how I. If people talk about Mark Hamill, the way I remember Mark Hamill is a fucking great voice actor.
Hell yeah.
I don't remember him as like I don't know what the fuck else he did. Honest to God, I have no idea. But fuck, man, he was so good as a voice actor. So I have a big affinity for the Goblins. I think that they're both great, but I want to give a big shout out to the Hobgoblin for just
Mm.
just just a wonderful time. Just a real villain. A real villain. You know what I mean? Just a real fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
You know? I don't really know any villains that like stand out to me as like being terrible, but there were a lot of really
Mm.
good ones in there.
Yeah, I can't really. I mean, aside from,
The big wheel.
yeah, but maybe Baron Mordo as well,
Yeah, that was a
after
bit
his standing
strange.
around.
Yeah, he could have done something. He could have stolen that fucking thing himself. I don't know why he didn't.
Yeah.
It's a very unusual situation. Again, it was a weird way to introduce Venom and Carnage into the thing. Like you couldn't thought of a different way to bring Carnage into that. You had to bring Baron Mordo and Dormammu into the whole thing. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
correct, but listen, man, they made some choices. They weren't always correct. They did their best they could, and for the most part, they did a pretty good job. So
Yeah.
they must be
And
commended for that.
they managed to wrap up the series in a pretty satisfying way as well.
Yes, I
To the
think so.
point where I don't know, like, obviously, this year we saw X-Men 97 come out, which was a continuation of that beloved cartoon from the early 90's as well.
Yes.
Like, I don't know if like a continuation of Spider-Man would be necessary. Like, I'd sort of love to go back to this world and see them, you know, hopefully try and replicate the success of X-Men 97. But at the same
Mm.
time, I think this sort of wrapped itself up in such a way that we don't really need to go back. And part of me does worry about it like tarnishing the show a little bit as well.
Yes, I agree with that. And I will put out a example for you.
Mm.
A couple of years ago, I say a couple of years ago. Obviously, I mean longer than that because time moves very quickly. But One of my favorite shows used to be Futurama.
Mm.
And Futurama was great because it came in, it did its business, and then it got canceled. And it was perfect.
Yeah.
Like if you watch the run of season 1 to season 4 of Futurama, fuck me, dude. That show is hard to beat. Right? Like it's tight. They're not
Yeah.
all perfect, obviously, but it's so tight. It's so like these guys know what their characters are. They know how much time they have to tell the story. They're gonna tell that story. They're gonna do it. It's gonna be funny as fuck. It was like at the time when it got canceled, I'm like wall to wall, bell to bell. That might be the best show of all time.
Mm.
It's so tight. It's so funny. It's so good for what it does. It does it so good. Then they brought Futurama back, and then they brought it back again, and then they brought it back again, and now they brought it back like a fifth time, and it's not good.
Is it not good? I've not watched
No,
any of the new stuff. Oh
we
man.
last year when I went to my friend's house, who had the kid who was watching that Spider-Man show. Funny
Mm.
enough, we already hung over one day, so we're like, why don't we just sit here and watch that new season of Futurama? So we did. And we watched, I would say, 5 or 6 episodes in a row. And we didn't laugh once.
Oof.
I'm like, this is not good. Like, this is bad, man. And it's a shame to sit there and watch something you used to love a lot
Mm.
turn into this. You know, and it's like night and day. I watched a new episode of The Simpsons today.
Oh, okay.
And it was bad. But it wasn't bad as in like it was a piece of shit. It was
Mm.
just like this isn't what that show is. This what I'm watching right now is not what The Simpsons was.
Yeah.
And also it's not funny, which is also a detriment. But it's just not what it was. And that's what I felt with these Futurama episodes. They had it perfectly. Season 1 to 4, perfect. You don't need nothing else. You don't need it. It's tight. It's perfect the way it is. It's nice to bring it back. It's nice for nostalgia. It's nice to give those guys who worked on the show something else to do. But as a story, you don't need this.
Mm.
And I feel like it's the same with that Spider-Man show. And potentially the X-Men show. I haven't seen the new X-Men, 97, whatever it is.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
haven't seen it. I'm sure people tell me it's great. It might
It
be
is.
great.
Yeah, it
I'm
is.
sure it is. But then you're like, the original Spider-Man was so tight. I think by the end of it they knew we're done. Let's just do what we have to do and get in and out and be
Mm.
finished with it. If they brought it back, I would feel like it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
And like like I said, I haven't seen the X-Men one, so I don't know if that is. I mean, I bet it's something similar. Like they added because there's been so many X-Men stories after that. There's so much more stuff they can tell in their own spin on it and put their own characters in it. It's probably still really good. So I can't say for yes or no if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with Spider-Man, I feel like, is a lot of the Spider-Man comics that have come out post 2000 haven't been that good. So to put them in TV, even to put them on your own spin of things, it's going to be a really good spin to make a lot of that stuff work.
Yeah.
So to leave Spider-Man 94 the way it is the best way to do it, because that way you have it. It's a moment in time.
Yes.
It's captured right there. People who remember it love it, and people who go back to it will love it because it is what it is. To make a reboot of it now would be unnecessary. There's no need for that. We don't need to do that. We already have the original. And like we said with the X-Men, with this, if they did a new Spider-Man, it could be great. It could be. But
it could be garbage.
Correct. The chances, let's be honest. Let's be really honest with ourselves. The chances of it being good to garbage, they're skewed one direction.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the garbage direction. And I just don't want to see it.
Yeah.
Especially because they've already made like other Spider-Man cartoons. Just make other Spider-Man cartoons.
Exactly.
Just do it. If you want to do something different, just do something else. We don't need it. We've already seen 3 different reboots of Spider-Man in the films.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In the time frame between Spider-Man 94 and now, we've seen 3 different reboots of Spider-Man in the films. We don't need more. And we've probably seen. We had like Spider-Man 2099 and then Spider-Man. What was the other Spider-Man film? The Spider-Man TV show? Unleashed?
TV show. Oh. Yeah, that rings a bell.
Was it Unleashed? It was something like that. Unlimited?
Ultimate Spider-Man.
Ultimate Spider-Man, Spider-Man 2099. There's been other Spider-Man TV shows.
There was a Spider-Man Unlimited as well, yeah.
Was okay. Well, I was technically correct. The best kind of correct. But that's we don't need a reboot of this one because it already happened. Just do something different. Surprises that way.
Yes, I would concur with that.
Do you have any other closing thoughts on the Spider-Man 1994 television show?
No.
Nothing?
I mean, what more can we say? We've, espoused how much we love the show and how good it could be, and
Who do you think was your favorite voice actor on it?
I mean, Mark Hamill.
Yeah, fair enough.
100%.
I thought Spider-Man. Who did the voice of Spider-Man? He did a great job.
That was a gentleman by the name of Christopher Daniel Barnes.
He did a great job.
Yeah.
I thought that's worth pointing out. He did a great job. But when you watch that show, if anybody is listening to this and it has inspired them to go back and watch the old 90's Spider-Man TV show, you'll be amazed at how good the voice acting is. Like the Hobgoblin, the Kingpin, the Shocker, Hydroman, Carnage, Venom, just Dr. Octopus. They're so good.
Mm-hmm.
They're really good. Like just pay like extra attention to how good those guys are. The voice directing is very, very, very good. I don't know who their voice director was on that show, but that shit's fucking on point.
Yeah.
Everybody hits their mark correctly. So I think that would be my closing point. If I was to put a bow on this show, I would say listen to the voice acting in that show. It's sometimes because it's from the 90's, the animation can be a little bit hit or miss, shall we say?
Mm-hmm.
But the voice acting makes up for it. It's on point. It draws you in. It's
Absolutely
worth watching that show. It's fucking unbelievable, man. Do you have any other closing statements?
I think on that point, we should just cut to the usual plugs.
Okay. Well, since Corey isn't here, I'm gonna promote Corey's Large Cup.
Yep.
Which is his podcast where he talks about just life. He talks about all sorts of stuff. He doesn't really have a designated topic. He just talks about whatever comes to his head. And he posts it and then uploads it, and we can all listen to it. It's a wonderful show. It's really interesting. You should listen to it. Subscribe to it on Spotify. John, I'm obligated to ask you what your film count is at right now.
It is at 688.
Wow, what was the last film you watched?
It was Immaculate, starring Sydney Sweeney as a nun who gets impregnated by some crazy religious people who are trying to, I guess, bring back Jesus through sort of cloning or something. I don't know. It was weird, but I enjoyed it.
Oh, it sounds weird. Not gonna lie. It sounds pretty weird. Have you seen the new Venom film?
I have not seen it yet, no, but I've heard terrible things about it.
It's so weird. Before we started the show, I went on the Facebook, and it was from like Facebook shows you adverts you don't want to see,
Mm-hmm.
shows you stuff. And one of the adverts was for a review that Screen Rant did, where they were very optimistic about the Venom film.
Oh, wow.
I'm like, interesting. How much money did they pay you for that?
Yeah.
Because from what I heard, it wasn't good. Well, we'll see how that goes.
Yes.
We'll see how that goes. I don't do anything, so I have anything to promote.
Not even Explodey Plays?
There's no point. We've been picking this up since we brought this show back, right? And when did we bring this show back? Like March?
Something like
Before
that,
March,
yeah.
because I went to WrestleMania in April.
Oh, yeah, this is true, yeah.
So we're talking before March. I haven't uploaded the goddamn thing to that show. I have stopped recorded. I haven't uploaded any of it. So if you want to go to Explodey Plays at youtube.com, you can subscribe. You might find something. If you don't find something, don't worry about it.
There's plenty of old some things to watch, though.
There's a lot of old shit to watch. Corey was watching some of them. He really liked them.
There you go.
Which is really sweet of him. I like how he's the only one that watches my videos.
I mean,
it's very sweet. Thank you very much, Corey. I appreciate that.
He's
gonna listen to this in the editing, and I'm gonna say thank you very much, Corey. And then out loud, he's gonna say, "Oh, don't worry about it," but I won't hear it because
but
he'll
you
say
know he's gonna say it.
I know he's gonna say it. Yeah. But he's a nice man, and that's why you should listen to his show, Large Old Cup, on Spotify. Please listen to it. It's pretty good. Subscribe to it. Give him more follows. It's worth listening to. He's a smart man.
Indeed.
Smart man. I think that's it, right? Anything else you want to plug? Do you want to talk about your book?
No.
When's it coming out?
2020 never.
Oh, look forward to that, fellas. Look forward to that. It's gonna be a barnstormer when that one comes out. He's gonna make fun of so many people in Hollywood. It's gonna be unbelievable. You're gonna watch it. A lot of stories. A lot of true stories he had with real rock stars. You know what I mean?
Dishing the dirt.
He lived a life, man. He lived a life.
Yeah.
It'll be unbelievable. My book's already available.
It actually is.
It really is. You can go on to Amazon and you can find it. I forgot what's it called. The wonderful world of Captain Explodey.
There you go.
If you Google that, no, if you go to Amazon.com/Amazon.co.uk/whatever country you live in, you can find my book. I've been getting. I feel like somebody's been reading it because I kept getting 1p royalties from Amazon.
Oh wow!
So I've made like 3p off Amazon the last 2 months. I'm like, that's interesting. So somebody, thank you. Somebody must have been reading it because you put it up as a book or as a Kindle. So somebody must be reading it as a Kindle or have looked at it as a Kindle and then just turned it off again. I don't know. I got 1p. I got 3p. I think I got 3p for it.
Well, as long as they download it, then it sounds like you get at least 1p.
I mean, if I could get more than 1p, that would be nice. But you know what? We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
Well, I'll keep you guys updated in the next episode. But I think that's it. Thank you very much for listening to the show. This was without Corey, who normally reins us in and keeps us in check. I see us. I mean me more so than John. Because I have a tendency to ramble, which I did about Venom for like 20 minutes. But
that's okay. Corey's gonna cut that bit out.
Oh, he cut all that out. Yeah. This podcast gonna be like 7 minutes long. But yes, thank you very much for listening. We really appreciate it. Follow us, subscribe. We're on YouTube, Smark Avengers. We're on Spotify, Smark Avengers. Follow, subscribe, tell all your friends. Anything else you want to say before we close things up, John?
Nope.
Great. Well, then I think that's the show. Thank you very much for listening. We will see you next week for some more comic book based shenanigans. So, thank you very much for listening and goodbye.
Bye bye.
Goodbye. That was pretty good.
Yeah.